So there are 3 rules. Don't expose them to bright light. Don't get them wet. Never ever feed them after midnight. And wait, there's a 4th rule. Make sure you subscribe to the Sarah O'Connell Show. Hi, I'm Zach Galligan, and welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Zach Galligan, welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show. How are you today?
I'm very relaxed, as you can see.
Very relaxed. So I want to go back and celebrate your entire amazing career to date. And of course, I must start with Gremlins, which was your first feature film. Can you tell me how you got involved with that? What was the audition process like? How did you even hear about it?
Basically, what happened was I had managed to get an agent around the summer of 1981. So I had been with them almost 2 years. So they were getting me pretty consistent auditions. There was a lot in the early 80s. There was sort of an explosion of opportunities for people, for young actors and roles, specifically from 16 to 21. So I was 19 and I had a baby face, and I could easily play 16 and probably struggled to play 20. So basically, I was going up for a lot of those roles, and there were a lot of opportunities. If you look back at the early 80s, there was a real explosion, and it really manifested itself with The Outsiders and Rumblefish, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Breakfast Club, St. Elmo's Fire, all those Brat Pack movies.
Yeah.
That was the era that I was in. And that's what, there were really a ton of casting opportunities. So I simply got an audition for this movie, Gremlins. I was told that Spielberg was involved in a producing capacity, but he would not be directing it, but he would be producing it and would be selecting the leads. I wasn't allowed to see the script. I was only told it was called Gremlins. They sent 3 pages of dialogue over, and it was this scene in the movie where I asked Phoebe Cates' character out on a date. We're walking along the street, and she's like, "Why don't you like?" And I'm like, "Why don't you like Christmas? What's not to like about it?" And she hints that she's got a secret, dark secret in the past.
Yeah.
Name, which we find out later, is of course her dad getting stuck in the chimney, which is hilarious or sick, depending on, or both. And so we had that one scene given to us. So I went in, and the casting director was a woman named Susan Arnold. I read for her. She was like, "Wow, that was really cute. Great. Can you come back in a couple of days and meet the producer and the director?" I was like, "Sure." So I came back to meet the producer and the director 2 days later, and I only met the producer, Mike Fennell. There's more than one producer on the movie. So Mike Fennell was basically sort of what you would call the line producer, who was going to be the day-to-day guy who was going to be taking care of it. And Spielberg was going to be overseeing it as a kind of, more as an executive producer.
Right. So was he on set, or was he kind of just monitoring the production and seeing dailies?
We'll get to that. He was mostly doing Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, but he was definitely, when the shooting of that movie was over, he came on the set a bunch once he was available. So he made his presence felt for sure.
Yeah.
So I went in to meet the producer, and Joe Dante was not there because he was plane sick. He flew to New York, and he's a terrible flyer. And so he was so ill, he was still in his hotel. So I read for Mike Fennell, and Mike was like, "That's great. Could you come back on Friday?" And I was like, "Sure." And the Friday is what they used to do a lot, and I think they still do it a little bit. They call it a mix and match session, where they pair you with people they think that you might have good chemistry with. And so I went to the mix and match session. It was still the same scene, so I didn't have to do any work. I'd already memorized the lines 2 other times. So I went there, and as soon as I walked in, I saw Phoebe Cates there. She was the only person that I recognized. I had read with her 2, maybe 3 times before for other
Oh, really?
projects.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and had not been cast because she was very much like me in that she was a Manhattanite. She was a New Yorker.
Mm.
She went to private school. I went to private school. You know, she wore a little school uniform. I wore jacket and tie. We were both the same age. And, you know, she was a lot bigger than I was because she was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh,
And she
yeah.
was a member of a big teen magazine here in America called 17 magazine. So she was
Yeah.
already sort of like a heartthrob. So I walked in and I was like, hey, you're here? Because I didn't know she was reading for it.
Right.
And she's like, yeah, you're reading for this too. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I hope they paired us together.
Mm.
And so they hold on a second. I'm just going to sit up for a little bit.
Sure.
She and I started reading the script together. And maybe we had gone through it like 1.5 times. I think we were halfway through the second one. And Susan Arnold stuck her head out and was like, Zach, Phoebe, are you ready? And we were like, oh, I guess we are reading together. You know, they throw you a lot of curveballs at these auditions.
Yeah.
And so we got up and we walked in. And I think one of the things that helped me a lot was that I was nervous, but Phoebe was not really, if she was nervous, she didn't seem like it at all. She seemed very at ease and like she was having fun and very calm, cool, and collected. And this just seemed to be like audition number, 5,000 for her.
Right. Yeah.
That she had a very kind of, there was very little fear around her. All the fear was around me. So, when you're scared and you see someone else isn't scared, it makes you relax. So I really liked her and thought she was gorgeous and was completely enamored like every other American man and possibly woman too at the time. And, I just kind of relaxed and we read the scene. And at the end of the scene, I was waiting for Joe Dante was there. He'd finally gotten over his sickness.
Yeah.
And at the end of the scene, when I ask her out for a date, it's kind of cute, kind of awkward. And she's like, I'd love to. And then at the very end, I was waiting for Joe Dante to call cut. And he didn't call cut. And usually directors do that because they want to see what the actors will do in terms of improvisation and
Right. Yeah.
stay in character and extend the scene and keep it going and everything. And I didn't really know what to do. I was kind of stuck and I wasn't good at improv. I didn't know what to do. And so Phoebe and I were kind of shoulder to shoulder, not profile. We were just sort of like shoulder to shoulder facing forward, like we were walking down the street side by side. So I just kind of put my head and I leaned my head and I put it on her shoulder and I went like sigh, like isn't she gorgeous? And aren't I lucky to be doing this audition with her? And Joe Dante saw that and saw that I wasn't going to do any further lines or character work or whatever. And he kind of chuckled. He went, cut. And apparently, and by the way, this was all being put on videotape and being to Los Angeles because there was no internet. It's not like you could upload it. You had to take the physical cassette tape and Federal Express it across the country so that people could watch it. So apparently when Spielberg, who was in charge of the casting, saw the tape and he watched the tape and then he saw me put my head on Phoebe's shoulder, which of course is not in the script. It was just an awkward thing. Yeah. Apparently Joe Dante told me, he said, oh my God, look at that. He's already in love with her. And Joe Dante and Mike Fennell both laughed. And they were like, yeah. And then Spielberg got up and said, I don't really need to see the rest of the tape. Those two are it. I mean, they have the relationship already for real.
Yeah.
And so whoever else was on the tape after me, they never even got seen, apparently.
That's amazing.
So they, I got, that's how I got cast in.
So I guess they didn't just cast one role and then they go, okay, we're going to cast that character. They're like, we need to make sure all of the characters work together and then we'll cast all of them. That's kind of how they worked.
in this instance, yeah, they do it differently every time, but in this
Yeah.
instance, that's pretty much how they worked. Yeah.
And so Harry Mandel was, of course, the voice of Gizmo. Was he on set during filming, or did they sort of film or record his audio in post-production and then add it afterwards? Could you hear Gizmo while you were filming?
No. And one of the really crazy kind of trivia things about Gremlins that people are always freaked out about is I never met Howie Mandel when we were shooting.
Really?
And now I still have never met him to this day.
Oh my God.
I don't
Seriously?
know him. We've never said hello. We've never said hello on social media.
Yeah.
He's just a stranger. I mean, he's just a person I don't know who did the voice of Gizmo.
Oh wow.
And it's very, very strange that we've never met. I think it's very odd, to be honest.
Absolutely, because you're kind of so important in each other's careers, you know, the characters in that relationship. And he played Gizmo in the sequel too, right?
Yeah.
There weren't any screenings that you're all at or anything like that?
Not where we both attended.
Wow, that's incredible. I did not know that. Yeah, and it's been 36 years now as well, so that's quite. Are you tempted to keep that going at this point, or would you happily sort of converse with him if the opportunity arises?
Oh, I mean, I would imagine that the meeting would happen on some talk show or something like that.
Right.
I mean, I'd be happy to meet him. Seems like a nice guy.
Sure.
And I think we both would probably just shake our head and go, "It's so odd that it never happened." I mean, that's basically the story. Is that it's just odd that it went on decades later and I've never met him.
And then say, obviously, you would have spoken about the film a lot at this point, but sort of looking back, what were your favourite scenes to film? Not knowing necessarily what the entire film was even going to turn out like, but what were your most fun days on set?
For Gremlins?
Yeah.
What were my favorite days? Well, obviously there was the kissing scene with Phoebe. That was kind of fun. And there was
a theme here, yeah.
There was so much stress and I was so stressed out about it. She was so stressed out about it too, because by that time we had spent, by the time the kissing scene, usually, let me back up.
Right.
Usually, and I don't know if people know this, they put most of the romantic scenes, whether it's being in bed together or kissing or making out, all of the romantic stuff. So you shoot it first and get it out of the way.
Right, okay.
That way, if the two actors end up hating each other, which happens a lot, or it ends up that they're not attracted to each other at all, there's no chemistry, you get it out of the way and you don't wait for the two actors who hate each other to have to now pretend to be in love with each other.
Mm.
But since really there's so little romance with me and Phoebe, I mean, the kiss is just like a tiny little part of the story.
Yeah.
There wasn't really much attention paid to that. So they put it probably the last 10 days of filming, I would guess. Certainly the last 10 days of her filming.
Sure.
And so by that time, we had been hanging out all April, all May, all June. She had a boyfriend in New York that she lived with, so it was very platonic.
Sure.
And so we were like really, really good friends. And so then to kiss your really, really good friend who you're not attracted to is like a weird thing. So I think she felt very odd about it. And I think she felt kind of stressed out about it. And I was stressed out about it too. And then to make things worse, it was the day we shot the scene, it was the first day that Spielberg came on set.
Oh, wow.
So he came on set and everybody is freaking out. Oh my God, Steven's here. It's like the king has showed up. Everyone's rolling out the red carpet. Oh my God, Spielberg's here. Holy crap. People are freaking out. And so I'm freaking out too because he cast me and I haven't even met him.
Yeah.
So I finally meet him and he's like, "Hey, I've been looking at the dailies. Good job." And I'm like, "Oh my God, thank God." Of course, if I hadn't been doing a good job, what I didn't realize at the time is I would have been fired a long time ago.
Yeah, you would have met him a lot sooner.
I mean, they fired. Yeah. I mean, they fired an actor off Back to the Future and replaced him with Michael J. Fox after shooting for 6 weeks. So anyway, so I met him and he was super cool and everything like that. And then we're going to do the kissing scene, and Joe Dante comes up to me and says, Steven would like to direct this scene. And I was like, oh my God, no, come on. Like, there's already so much tension and nervousness around it, you know, and now Spielberg's going to step in there and he's going to direct the scene. And what Spielberg's idea was at the last second, because Phoebe's holding Gizmo in the backpack. At the very last second, as we were going to kiss, Gizmo's going to come up between the two of us and interrupt us so that the kiss never happens. And Joe and Steven was like, what do you think about that idea? Now, he's my boss and he's Steven Spielberg and I'm 19-year-old nobody. So I was like this. That sounds great. I love it. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, so now I don't get to kiss her? What the hell? You know? And so we tried it a couple of times like that. And it didn't work. It didn't work. So we obviously it didn't work because we kept the kiss in the movie, which is what the audience wanted and what every 14 or 15-year-old girl wanted, is for the boy to kiss the girl. And so we did the scene. So that was a crazy day. And then blowing up the movie theater was a crazy day. Essentially blowing up the swimming pool, filling it with 100,000 gallons of liquid nitrogen. That was pretty crazy. That's how we got that effect.
Were they kind of things that they could only do once? Because obviously once they've blown the building up, they didn't have a spare building, right?
They probably could do it. They probably could do it a second time.
Okay.
But it would be very difficult and prohibitively expensive. And you pretty much got the feeling that you were one and done and it better go well.
Sure.
Certainly, I think with blowing up the movie theater, I think that was a kind of you get one chance. I think the swimming pool, they might have been able to do more than once, but yeah, blowing up usually when you blow stuff up, you only get about one opportunity because then this destructive destroyed.
And so there's a scene towards the end of the film where a gremlin is running at you with what looks like a live chainsaw, but was it?
At the beginning, it's a chainsaw that doesn't have a blade in it. But once he gets close to me and I'm fighting off with the bat, they put an actual blade in it.
Okay.
And you can see that because the chainsaw is cutting through the bat.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wondered if they had some small thing that was pumping out sawdust or something, but they were literally cutting through.
No. It was a live blade, and you never in a billion years do that today. It was way too dangerous. And the special effects guy, came up to me, and he goes, put your one hand here and put your other hand here. And he goes, and lock them. He goes, don't move them side to side. Don't move them up and down. Just keep them nice and locked. I go, well, what happens if I move them from side to side? He goes, you could lose a finger. And he walked away. And I was like, what the hell? So the entire time, if you watch that sequence where the chainsaw is cutting through the bat, it's an actual blade cutting through an actual Louisville slugger. It's actual wood chips going in my face, and I am holding my hands as steady as possible. And it was tough because, you know, it's a guy holding a gremlin holding a chainsaw. So it's like kind of removed a couple of levels from an actual human being holding the chainsaw. And the chainsaw is like hitting knots. You know how there are knots in a tree? It's hitting knots in the bat, and it's bouncing and jumping and stuff like that. And I'm just going, please don't cut my finger off.
That must have been quite stressful.
Making the movie was actually surprisingly more stressful than probably most people would think it was, because there were just all sorts of little things like that. You know, on top of the fact that I'm 19, I'm completely unknown. I have an $11 million Warner Brothers Spielberg movie riding on my shoulders. I'm in 90% of the scenes in the movie. I shot something like 71 out of 75 days.
Wow.
I mean, you know, and I'm a college kid. I'm a
Yeah.
college sophomore, basically. Or as you Brits call, I don't know what you would call second year university.
I don't even know if we have a name for it. I think we just spend most of the time in the pub, and that's kind of it, whatever that's called. I've got a very important question. So obviously one of the rules with Mogwai is you cannot let them eat after midnight. But when can they start eating again? Is it when the sun comes up? Is it dependent on the time zone you're in, or is it just to do with the moon being in the sky?
Well, now you sound like the questions that are asked in Gremlins 2.
Right.
Where, you know, the person says, if the gremlin gets a caraway seed stuck in their teeth and they travel across the international date line, what does it mean? And the answer is it's a very loose rule. I always thought it meant you can't feed them essentially late at night, but once the sun comes up and it's daytime, you can probably feed them.
Okay. So it's an important thing to find out in case I ever become in possession of one.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I would not want to get that wrong, and I've been panicking about it since I was about 7, so it's good to have clarity on that. Did you ever get any souvenirs from the set? Did you get to take a copy of Gizmo home, or have any of your costumes or anything like that?
I didn't get any costumes. I probably would have liked to take my kind of burgundy jacket with me, my Mac. I didn't get that. I got to take the sword that I cut the head off of the Gremlin with, and I also got to take the baseball bat.
Oh, wow.
Ironically, I had both of those objects for a long time, and then I went to some very early versions of conventions, you know, like Comic-Cons.
Yeah.
And on 2 separate occasions, I encountered physically disabled fans, and I had brought the props with me. And the fans pleaded, like, could they have the props?
Yeah.
And I was surrounded by groups of people, and they're all looking at me like, well, can he have it? Can he have it? Can he have it? And I sort of, I would say, got convinced to give both of those rather valuable props away.
Sure. Wow.
So
that's a really lovely thing that you did. I have this from when the first movie came out. I wasn't even quite old enough to even watch it yet, and I wanted to. I had to wait for it to come out on VHS so I could rent it and watch it like everyone else had. But I did get this, which is kind of like a. So I have that since the 1980s, and I've had it on a shelf ever since.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And then, so we just in the past week celebrated the 36th anniversary of Gremlins. What do you attribute to its lasting success and popularity?
I think there are a few things that explain its success. One, I think the fact that it's about rules and following rules and breaking rules and the perils of breaking rules. I think the rules are really a pivotal part of the movie, because even now you'll see on social media, you know, someone will say something and they'll be like, yeah, but don't feed him after midnight. Like, the rules really stuck in the public consciousness.
Yeah.
So, you know, I really think that I think that don't feed them after midnight thing was really the vagueness of the rule in a way is what made the rule work. If it had been more specific, I don't think people would have remembered it. But the fact that it was kind of like a throwaway line, like, oh, don't do this, you know. And I think there's also a lot of people really relate to the idea of being one kind of thing and then turning into a bad version of it.
Right.
So the whole notion of being a gizmo and then you turn into a gremlin, it's just sort of the flip side of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm good now, but when I don't have my coffee, I'm a gremlin. Like you'll see those memes, you know, like
Yeah.
it'll go before my coffee and you'll see a picture of a gremlin and go after coffee and you see a picture of Gizmo.
Right.
So that's, you know, there's a very yin yang kind of duality, the duality of human beings and who we are, you know, obeying the rules, disobeying the rules, happy, grumpy, angry and destructive, happy and peaceful. So it taps into a lot of things about being a human, even though it's about creatures.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
And then the other reason why it lasts is because I think it's an extremely well-made movie. Technically, it's very tight. It's not too long. The story is very timeless. If you notice, there's very few things in it that date it. There's no reference to politics or anything that's currently going on in the world at the time. There's, you know, the only thing that makes it look a little dated is some of the technology, you know, people on some of the payphones and stuff like that. But most of the story is very, very a timeless story. It's boy meets girl, boy can't get girl, boy gets girl. There's a rival for the girl. There's that little love story. Then there's the, you know, boy with the best friend, and the best friend screws everything up, and the whole thing. And then of course, there's Gizmo, who is a triumph of movie magic. I mean, he's one of the most iconic characters to come out of the 80s movies. And now with the animated series coming out next year, Gremlins Secrets of the Mogwai, he's going to make I think he's going to make an enormous comeback.
Yeah.
Because you saw how people responded to Baby Yoda. It'll be just as good, if not better, for Gizmo.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Do you know anything about the animated series? Are you involved in it? Are you providing a voice for it or anything like that? What can you tell us about it?
I can't tell you anything at the moment because they haven't even finished writing the stuff yet. So it's making an animated series a very long, no pun intended, drawn out process.
Very true.
And so it tends to move slower than people think. And in fact, the animated series may not even be out until a year from now, maybe even slightly longer.
Sure.
So I don't know if I'm going to be involved in it. It's a little early to tell.
It's very exciting, and I'm, of course, looking forward to finding out more. One thing I didn't realize also by all the talk of the anniversary and all that kind of stuff is, of course, that the film was released in the summer. It's a Christmas movie, and also it would have been filmed, was it in Burbank, California, the Warner Brothers backlot?
That's correct.
Right, so was there just fake snow everywhere the whole time?
Yeah, it's just, if you look closely, you can see that it's just sand.
Oh, okay.
It's just white sand. That's a lot easier because it doesn't melt.
Yeah.
And it's just blurry white stuff in the background, and it's all white sand everywhere, except for a couple of shots where they have to show my feet. And when they show my feet, they would bring in an ice truck, and they would take a huge piece of ice and they would grind it down in this enormous truck that looks like an oil tanker, not like an oil truck, you know, like a gasoline truck. And they would stick it in and it would grind. It would make this horrible noise. And then they would spray snow chips on the ground. And, you know, it was hot. Even at night, it was like probably 65 or 70 degrees, which is like 18, 19 Celsius. So we had to shoot it very quickly. So as soon as they laid it down, I mean, I was standing there waiting, and they would spray it down, and then they would put the clapper in front of it and go cut, and you would see my feet go crunch, 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 crunch. And we would do that, and it would be melted like in 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then, so at the time, there were loads of, after Gremlins came out, there were quite a few copycat films as well. There was Ghoulies, Munchies, Critters, all those kind of things. What did you think of the films at the time?
I refused to see them.
Already?
Yeah, I found them kind of like insulting ripoffs.
Yeah.
I was like, you guys are just trying to capitalize on our movie, and now you're just trying to do something like, and they were all low budget, and most of them were not that good. So I was kind of like, you ain't getting my money.
I rented them out at the time, but that was kind of it. I watched them once and sort of forgot about them. Whereas Gremlins is still a film I watch at least once a year. I love revisiting it, and it's endured in a special way for the many reasons you described them more. It's just a classic.
I'm surprised that it has. I'm surprised that it has lasted this long. But what I'm really surprised about is that it really, in the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, it really has grown. The appreciation has grown, and it's all due to the internet. Because what happens with the internet is, you get all of the nerdy film people, and they get online, and they all basically reach a consensus. And it's quite clear that people say, what are the I've read 50 articles, 100 articles that say, what are the best movies of the 80s? And it's almost always Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Dirty Dancing, Top Gun, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Die Hard. Like, that's your top 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And Gremlins is almost always mentioned in the top 5. It's almost always like, I would say, like, Back to the Future is number 1, Ghostbusters is 2, and like Die Hard and Gremlins are like 3 and 4. Dirty Dancing, Top Gun are like 5 and 6.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, it's a real survivor. It's one of the best films. People think it's one of the best films, the classic films of that decade. And it's just a monster hit.
It really
So, yeah, I mean, it's I tell this story a lot, and it really says everything. I was in Las Vegas maybe 3 years ago,
right.
and almost every hotel has a casino in the lobby, whether you want the casino or not. I don't gamble.
Of course, yeah.
But I have to stay somewhere. So I was staying at this hotel, and there was a casino in the lobby. And I was up in my room, and they were like, Zach, we're here to pick you up. And I was like, okay, cool. So I got on the elevator, and of course you have to walk through the casino to get to the parking pickup.
That's their trick.
Exactly. It's like exit through the gift shop. Got my stuff in my bag, and I get out of the elevator, and I start walking through the casino. And as I walk through the casino, I see something out of the corner of my eye. And I turn, and I look, and against the wall are 1, 2, 3 enormous, you used to call them one-armed bandits. I guess you'd call them slot machines. From the floor all the way up to the ceiling. Obviously, you only play the part on the bottom, but they stretched all the way up to the ceiling, and all these graphics on it. Like 3 huge pillars on the side of the wall. And I look, and it's, hold on a second, I'm going to blow the story. It's Lord of the Rings, Gremlins, and what was the third one? I've told this story so many times. Anyway, maybe it was Harry Potter or something like that. And you looked at it, and you're like, oh my God, you see them side by side, and you realize your movie, because I'm so close to the movie, I don't think about it that way. I'm part of it. I'm not. Of course, yeah. I go, oh my God, there's my movie is on the same level with those other movies in terms of because they would, and by the way, the 3 machines, the same company. Yeah, so obviously the company is saying these 3 movies are equal.
Out of everything that they've made as well.
Right. And so you go, my God, and so of course I went over to it, and it's crazy because, you put the change in, and if you get like 4 versions of Phoebe's face, you get like a certain amount of stuff. And then if you get 5 versions of me and Gizmo with the kid in the backpack, you win stuff. And there's some guy sitting there smoking a cigarette and having a cocktail at, 11 o'clock in the morning. and he's putting his change in, and he's flipping around, and there's like my face, Phoebe's face, my face, Phoebe's face, my, and it's like, and it's crazy. And I'm like, and I looked at him, and I was like, hey man, how you doing? He's like, oh, I'm good, doing good. I'm like, you winning? He's like, and I no idea that the slot machine he was playing on was essentially me.
Wow, that's so funny. I love that. Do they kind of have license to just keep printing your face on anything they want still? Could they, release T-shirts?
When I signed my contract in 1983, I was an unknown 19-year-old, so you have zero leverage. You can't demand anything. They'd be like this. I think we did. I think my agent asked for something, and there was like, we'd like 0.1%, which would have been millions of dollars.
Right.
And they were like, no. And my agent got kind of upset. And the negotiator, I guess it was on the Warner Brothers, the casting director goes, well, you can always just turn the project down, in which case we have a line of people about 10,000 people long waiting to take the part if you say no. And we were like, guess we'll sign it away. There was nothing really we could do about it. And then, of course, when you sign it, it says in perpetuity, which is legal term for the rest of your life, which includes now.
In 1988, you went on to work on the horror comedy Waxwork as Mark Rothmore. Is it true that the director wrote the script for that film in 3 days?
Wouldn't surprise me. That's how he works. It's pretty obsessively. When he starts writing, he basically sits down and bangs it out. So
working on the film kind of put you off going to waxwork museums like Madame Tussauds?
Not really. I mean, when you're doing a movie, it's a movie. You know what I mean?
Course.
So it's like I did a Tales from the Crypt episode, and it's about, a guy who's a puppeteer.
Yeah.
So people are like, did that put you off puppets? I'm like, dude, I was doing a movie about an evil puppet. It doesn't put you off puppets. You know what I mean? It's do you really think that Richard Dreyfuss decided not to swim in the ocean after doing Jaws? I don't think he cared. He's like, it was a fake shark, So,
and it was only half a shark too, because I've seen it at the Universal tour.
Yeah.
You might have a massive fear of like half missing sharks though. We don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. But at least sharks are real, wax figures that come to life, to my knowledge, are not real. So I wasn't really nervous.
Thankfully, to our knowledge so far, it hasn't happened. In the film, there's monsters like Dracula and Werewolf and Mummy and things like that. If the film were to be remade in 2020, who do you think the monsters would be?
Well, we did Waxwork 2, and in Waxwork 2, he threw like Alien in.
Yeah.
But nobody really saw that one. So you probably do like Predator and you could have like the Nun. I don't know. Maybe some of the creatures from Insidious.
Right.
You probably have to populate it with like current. Maybe the Thing from Scream would be in there. Who knows?
Yeah.
You get all those copyright issues, so that's the problem.
So in 1990, of course, you returned for Gremlins 2, the new batch. How long after the first film came out was there talk of a sequel? I know in most cases they wait to see what the box office is like and stuff like that, but when you were filming the first, were they sort of talking about ideas that they could be doing for the sequel?
If you look, there was a big gap between a lot of sequels there. Like, for example, Ghostbusters 2 was 5 years later.
Yeah.
Back to the Future 2 and 3 were 5 years later. So 5 or 6 years was kind of the standard for the big budget stuff. I knew they were talking about Gremlins 2.
Yeah.
I knew that they had, I had heard about maybe 3 or 4 years after the first movie that there was a script that was getting kind of hot about Gremlins in Vegas.
Yeah.
That people were talking about that they thought was really good. Then that didn't pan out. There was another script in there too. I can't remember what that was about, and that didn't pan out. And then what happened with Gremlins 2 is it really, for me at least, it happened very suddenly. I was shooting another movie at the time, and I came home, and I was on my last day or two of that movie. I got a call from Mike Fennell, who I just talked to you about, who was the producer.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, we're going to do Gremlins 2. Are you up for it? I was like, wait, what? amazing. That's fantastic. When are we going to do it? Now, this was like end of February of 1989. He goes, oh, we're thinking of starting at the end of May. I go, of this year? He goes, yeah. I go, you mean 3 months from now? He's like, yeah. I'm like, whoa. Like, I suppose you could think 3 months is a fair amount of advance notice, but it seemed pretty shocking to me. And I was like, okay. So it was, I was kind of stunned at first. And it took me probably a week to wrap my brain around it. Then I was like, dude, what are you upset about? It's Gremlins 2. And, you know, basically I got super excited about it then. Then I read the script and it was just so much more of a comedy than the first one. I was kind of like, I hope this works. You know what I mean? I wasn't 100% sure whether or not, you know, fans were going to go for something that was so out and out a comedy. So I was concerned about that. Right. I didn't think it was scary enough. Yeah. I thought it needed some more scares to it. And I still think that. I still think it's not scary enough. And I think it kind of let down a lot of the Gremlins fans who wanted it to be more of the first style. And in fact, really, for years, for decades, you know, people would come up to me and they would come up to me on the street. They'd be like, yo, man, you were awesome in Gremlins. I was like, thanks, bro. And he's like, the second one, though, I don't know, dude. What were they thinking? You know, I would get that all the time. Like people would just give me unsolicited opinions. Sure. What is so interesting is that I would say in the last 10 or 12 years, it was like in 2008, it was like 80% of the people liked Gremlins 1 and 20% of the people liked Gremlins 2. Right. And now it's like 60-40, if not 55-45 in favor of Gremlins 1. Gremlins 2 is gaining. You know, a lot of people also see Gremlins 2 first and they go, oh, this is what a Gremlins movie is. It's this hilarious comedy. Then they go back, they see Gremlins 1, they go, dude, that was dark. Yeah. So if you see them in reverse order, you can see why people like Gremlins 2 better. Some people think Gremlins 2 is a funnier movie.
What is your favorite Gremlin of the new batch? Because, I mean, mine is Daffy, although I think he'd make a terrible dentist. My least favorite has to be the Spider Gremlin because it's horrific visually. But what was yours?
I like the Electric Gremlin. Yeah. I like the Electric Gremlin, and I like that he gets trapped in the phone and has to listen to the music. I always think that's one of my favorite gags.
So, of course, Christopher Lee was in the movie too. What was he like to work with? Because he'd been in so many iconic films up until that point as well.
Mr. Christopher was so great because he's very tall. He's about probably 6'4", 6'5". Yeah. And he's very thin and slender. You know, he tended to play scary, menacing characters. But in reality, he was just the kindest, gentlest, you know, most refined English gentleman. I can still see him, you know, and he was immaculately dressed. Yeah. He would get in wardrobe, but he would come to the set in suits and ties. I can still see him sitting in his director's chair, you know, it says Christopher Lee on the back. I can still see him sitting in his chair next to mine, you know, and sitting there with a cup of tea with his gigantic legs crossed very elegantly, sipping his tea peacefully, you know, and he would always be the first person, you know, and here I am, I'm on 25 and I grew up watching him in, you know, the Dracula movies and Sherlock Holmes movies and Hammer movies and stuff like that. And of course, to me, he was Scaramanga, Man with Golden Gun. I saw that when I was 10 years old. So here I am working with Man with the Golden Gun. And you know what? I think as soon as I hang up, I think I'm going to go watch Man with the Golden Gun. I haven't seen it in years. And I worked with him.
That's a great thing, isn't it? When you have this movie that you love, and then you at some point you manage to interact or work with that person, it kind of gives you a great appreciation of the original film and also a whole new perspective of the characters and the people in it as well.
Well, you know what's the strangest thing, and maybe this only happens to me, but sometimes, you know, I've now this next March, I will have been doing this for 40 years.
Wow.
That's a long time to do anything.
Right, yeah.
And there are times, like the other day, I caught myself doing something so funny. I mean, I cracked myself up with it. I was watching Nicolas Cage in this movie he did called Color Out of Space.
Yep.
And I'm watching it, and I went like this. God, he's so fearless as an actor. God, man, of all the actors, he's someone I'd love to work with. And then I stopped and I went, dude, you did work with him in 1990. I was like, oh, that's right. I worked with Nick. Wait a second, I know him. I did 2 scenes with him in this movie called Zandali. And then I pulled up the movie and I watched them. I was like, oh my God. And I watched it again. I was 26. He was 26. I mean, we were young men, you know. We were like barely out of college. And so, like, there'd be times when I'll do that. The other day, I was watching The Man Who Would Be King with Sean Connery, and Christopher Plummer is in it. And I'm watching it going, God, Christopher Plummer is so good. And I was like, dude, he played your dad in Danielle Steele's Crossings in 1985. Like, you spent 2 months with him. I was like, oh, yeah, I know Chris.
Yeah. That's
So it's like, so much time goes by. I haven't seen Christopher Plummer in person in 30 years, maybe longer. And so people don't realize 30 years is a long time.
It really is.
So after a while, you sort of like, it's almost like it happened, but it's almost like it didn't happen because it's so long ago. And you have to pull the stuff out and watch it again and go, oh yeah, that did happen. Because it's so long ago. It almost seems like it was a dream or something.
Because it's detached from your current situation.
So detached from your current situation. You're a completely different person. The world's a completely different world. You know, people haven't watched that Danielle Steele miniseries. No one's watched that in 30 years. Yeah, it's like it never happened, except it did.
Corey Feldman was, of course, in the original Gremlins. He wasn't in the sequel, but you did work with him again in Round Trip to Heaven a few years later.
Oh, wow. You're really going to do every single one of these films I did. So Round Trip to Heaven was, that was a movie that I was just, at the time, I was really bored. Yeah. And I thought that, I really thought that Gremlins 2 was going to really help me. And in fact, it really hurt me. Because it essentially, I mean, to be honest, it basically bombed. It didn't do well, and it killed the franchise for 30 years.
And that was because I guess it was released at the exact same time as Dick Tracy, right?
Yeah, and so that it was a very competitive summer of '90s, very tough summer.
Yeah,
and it just got squished. A year later, rather than getting all of these movies and offers and having, like the world open up to me, everything kind of contracted.
Right.
And so I just wasn't getting any offers. So I finally got an offer for this. And at the time I was in a relationship with a girl and it was going very poorly. And so they offered me this role in Round Trip to Heaven. And at that point, I actually had a little bit of leverage. And I said, I'll do this movie if you put my girlfriend in it too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And because I thought maybe that would make our relationship better.
Yeah.
But it didn't. And it just sort of prolonged the inevitable, maybe another 3 or 4 months, and then the relationship eventually ended. So I think if they had said, no, you can't put your girlfriend in it, I don't think I would have done that movie. But I did that movie because there was some money involved, and I thought it would be a good opportunity for me and my girlfriend to get on the set and get out of the apartment and just kind of get working again and do something positive. And instead, unfortunately, it just sort of exposed our differences and sped up the end of the relationship, which was fine because we were never going to get married or anything like that. 26, 27, we were just kids dating and whatever.
Yeah.
That's basically the explanation for Round Trip to Heaven.
It must be interesting sort of looking back on movies like that. They're also in many ways a snapshot of your life where you were at that moment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It's very, you know, not many people have, you know, because a lot of the movies I'm the lead in the movie too. So there's a lot of footage of you.
Yeah,
So I have tons of footage of myself from 17 to now.
Yeah.
So I get to watch myself age from, you know, a 17-year-old to a 57-year-old. And it's not many people have that.
Very true. Or you can watch the films in reverse chronological order and Benjamin Button yourself and get younger.
Like, yeah, or Merlin.
Yeah, exactly. Last night I revisited another of your films, All Tied Up, where at the beginning of it, your character walks into a window, knocks yourself unconscious, and you spend half the movie with your hands tied up behind your head. Was that sort of really physically, how much of the day were you actually spending with your arms in that position? Because it's quite a good chunk of the movie.
Well, that was an attempt to do an American version of a Spanish movie called Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down.
Right, okay.
With Antonio Banderas.
Mm.
It was a Pedro Almodovar movie that was very successful in Spain. And so they wanted to try and do sort of a kind of like a rom-com version, American version of it. So they got me and Terry Hatcher, and she was hot at the time because she did a movie called The Big Picture with Kevin Bacon. She hadn't gotten Lois and Clark yet, though. She was about a year away from getting that. So yeah, they would make me get in those positions and tie my arms up, and it was actually quite painful because I would have to do it for hours at a time, and eventually, like, we would do takes, and I would go, guys, you have to, as soon as the take is over, you have to untie me. Because as the days went on, it became more. It's like pulling the same muscle over and over again. So yeah, it was definitely painful. It was a fun movie to do, though. I had a good time doing it, and I really loved the ladies that I worked with. I really liked Terry and Tracy Griffith and Laura Harris. The three of them, I really enjoyed spending time with them because it was mostly me and the three girls on the set and at lunches together, and so it was great.
It was a fun movie to watch back, and if anyone's, I don't know in the US, but in the UK, if you have Amazon Prime, it's actually on there at the moment, so you can go and watch that, and yeah, I recommend it.
I haven't seen that movie in 25 years.
Already? So do you own all of your movies? Do you sort of, when they come out, do you sort of get them and add them to a collection or anything like that, or do you just kind of have ones that were sent to you?
I don't think I own maybe 2 or 3 of my own movies, and that's it. I don't watch, you know, there are actors who watch themselves over and over and over again, and I guess they like what they see.
Yeah.
I don't dislike what I see, but I don't watch my stuff over and over again.
Yeah.
I did it. I mean, it's like I watch it a couple of times when it comes out, and I get an opinion of it, and then I move on. There are some movies I've done I've never seen.
Already?
Yeah. Like some of the more low budget stuff that I would do primarily for money because they were offering me a lot of money. Yeah, there's one movie I did that I've never seen. Can't remember what it's called. Never seen it. It's the one with Carol Alden and John Laughlin and Corey Feldman's in it too.
Right.
Stormtrooper, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Stormtrooper.
So you worked with Corey a few times then, really, over the years?
I've known Corey since he was 11.
Yeah.
And the last time I saw him was maybe a couple of years ago. So I've known him almost his entire life.
Sure.
You know, and I watched him go from a 6th grader, you know, to a grown man with a kid. So, you know, that's fascinating to watch too.
In 2013, you were in the movie Hatchet 3. You adopted an accent for that role, didn't you? You were playing a sheriff.
Yes. Well, what happened with that was, Adam Green offered me the role of the sheriff and told me that we were going to shoot it down in New Orleans. And that was a big reason why I said yes, because I love New Orleans as a city. It's a great place to go and shoot in. And actually, the Nick Cage movie that I just mentioned before, Zandali, was shot down in New Orleans too. So I shot 2 movies down there. It's just a great city. I'm not sure I would live there, but it's a fantastic city to shoot in, and it's a fantastic city to visit. And so I got all excited, and I thought to myself, oh, you know what? One of the conditions was I could do anything I want with character.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I'm going to do like a Cajun accent because it takes place down in New Orleans.
Sure.
And so I flew down there about maybe 3 or 4 days early for some rehearsal and getting settled and wardrobe fittings and everything like that. To my horror, I discovered that very, very few people in New Orleans even speak with a Cajun accent. Like 95% of the time you'd go into shops and the person would be like, hi, can I help you? Wait, where's your accent? You don't have one. It's just a flat American accent.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, I've done all this practice. And now it's like, I thought for sure if you were a police officer in a New Orleans parish that you would have some kind of accent.
Sure.
And then I actually, stopped a cop on the street who was like a sheriff, in a New Orleans parish, and talked to him. And he was basically like, well, you're going to have to go and speak to the so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. So he had absolutely no accent either. So I'm like, oh my God, this is absolutely no authenticity to it whatsoever. So luckily, the actress who's playing my wife, is named Caroline Williams.
Yeah.
And she is from Houston, Texas. So she was like, hey there, Zach. It's so nice to see you. How you doing? And you start talking. Yeah. So I thought to myself, maybe I met my wife in Houston and we moved to New Orleans, which is very common because Houston and New Orleans are very close to each other. In fact, when Katrina hit, most of the refugees were moved from New Orleans to Houston. So they're only a few hours from each other and whatever. So they're it's not out of the realm of possibility at all. So I floated the idea to Adam, and he was like, that's great. So that's how I decided to come up, and I kind of made him talk. One of the most famous people comes from Houston was President Bush, W. So he talked like this. So it was kind of like, as the Brits would say, just taking the piss out of W a little bit. And it was just a super fun Houston accent kind of thing to do, and just had a great time doing it. And the other nice thing about it is, a lot of times when you're doing an accent, if you don't have an actual version of the accent around you, like a tape or something like that, you can slip out of it. But Caroline was if I ever felt it slipping, I would ask her a question. She would say it with her accent, and I would go there, and then it snaps right back. So Caroline Williams was kind of like having, a Rosetta Stone tape right next to you at all times.
Have you ever done accents in any other films as well?
Well, the most recent movie that I did, Madness in the Method, that came out with it was the Jason Mewes directorial debut. I play 2 roles in that. I play myself and like a strange version of myself. But then I also sort of play this British director. It's very, very, unctuous and kind of sleazy, sort of speaking in this particular way.
That's what everyone here sounds like.
Yeah. So he's the type of person that, is very much into the character. And I've worked with English directors like that. I was kind of spoofing some of them, sort of like, oh, yes. What do you think the character would say? Super hyper intellectual.
Sure.
Stuff like that. So I do an accent in that. I did a Southern accent. I did a Virginia accent like this in a Civil War movie I did one time, where the character has to speak like this the entire time because he's from Virginia. So I did accent like that the entire time. And I really, am just as much of a mimic as I am an actor. Like before I ever did acting, I would do imitations. I remember when I was 5 years old, I saw the Beatles' Yellow Submarine in the theaters. Because it was a cartoon. It was basically for kids.
Yeah.
And for days afterwards, I was walking around. There's a line in it where Ringo keeps. They go to the Sea of Holes, and Ringo takes a hole out of his pocket, and he goes, "I've got a hole in my pocket." It's just a stupid pun. And I spent like the entire time talking like the Beatles like this. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I could do this and go, "I've got a hole in my pocket," when I was in kindergarten. So I've always been doing imitations and impressions for years. And I've always been an Anglophile too. When I was 5, 6 years old, I would see The Prisoner on TV, the Patrick McGowan series. And then in the early 70s, we had Python here on public television. All of that great 70s British comedy that is now so legendary.
You've also starred in many TV shows throughout the years as well. Have you got any favorites when you're looking back on them?
It was pretty fun doing Tales from the Crypt. I think I like doing Melrose Place. Was fun. I did an episode of Melrose Place. I did an episode of Star Trek Voyager.
You did?
It's a pretty well-loved series. I'm trying to think of other thing. I did an episode of Law and Order Criminal Intent opposite Vincent D'Onofrio, who's a great actor. So that was a lot of fun. I've had a pretty good career, really.
You really have, yeah.
I've had a lot of different opportunities to do stuff, and I've turned some stuff down, not much. I've really enjoyed my career. The thing is, there was a period probably in the 90s when I really, really tried hard, at my career and stuff like that. But most of the time, I haven't really tried. I haven't really the expression like this person's thirsty, like, boy, this person is thirsty, like for ambitious and thirsty for money and fame and publicity and everything. I don't know why. I've never really been thirsty. Maybe I was at the beginning, but maybe I just got so much success so early. Before I'm 21, I'm, on the upper left-hand corner of Time, and there was a huge spread in Time magazine. I was on the cover of People magazine. I was a huge spreads in all sorts of different teen magazines, 17 magazines, and I just, I really was. By the time I was 21, I mean, I did Neil Simon on Broadway. Mr. Simon picked me. I did Gremlins. Mr. Spielberg picked me. I did tons of Aaron Spelling television stuff. Mr. Spelling personally picked me. I had really just so much success by the time I was 22 that I was kind of like, you know what? I did better than in 3 years. I did better than I ever thought I was going to be doing my entire lifetime. I think a lot of that like thirstiness and desire to be like a superstar, a lot of it kind of went away. It was kind of like, well, if I make it, cool. And if I don't make it, that's cool too. As you can imagine, I have a lot of friends who are actors, and a lot of them are very successful actors too, arguably much more successful than I am. They're more of a name than I am. And so I think I was sitting with one of my friends, I won't name him, but I was sitting with one of my friends and I was like, dude, he was telling some story and I was like, you just really stop and think about your career. I mean, like, you've worked with so many incredible people and directors, and you've been in this movie and that movie and this movie and that movie. And my God, man, I'd kill to have your career. And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, but you had a massive hit. And his point was, he did a lot of great work, but didn't really amount to all that much.
Right.
Whereas I had one gargantuan hit that will last forever. And so the grass is always greener, like obviously you'd like to have both, like Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise does. But those types of careers How many are there? 10, 15 out of the millions and millions of people who try and be actors?
You don't feel like you're chasing anything, but you're doing it because you want to do it. And I think that's better in a way.
The other thing too is that now that I'm hitting my mid 50s, although I had a young woman tell me the other day when I told her I was 56, she literally dropped what she was holding and she said she thought I was 42. I'm kind of excited because I really think, you can have careers extend incredibly long. To look at Christopher Plummer, like I said, and a perfect example too is Christopher Lee. When he was doing Gremlins 2, his career was kind of in a valley. If you want to talk about the peaks and the valleys of his career was kind of in a valley. He was not doing that great. He was in what you would call a fallow period. It wasn't until he got those second Star Wars series of Star Wars movies like Attack of the Clones and Lord of the Rings. So when he worked on Gremlins 2 in 1989, he was a decade away from having a renaissance, or as you Brits call it, a renaissance. Imagine telling Christopher Lee, you're going to have an enormous comeback, but it's going to take you you're going to have to wait another 10 years for it to happen. So the thing is, I really feel, if you kind of look at me and the way I look now and everything like that, I feel like I'm poised I could have another 10, 15, 20-year solid run.
Yeah, I hope so.
As an older character actor, there's no reason why I couldn't do it. And ironically, I think now that I don't want it to happen as much, and now that I'm not desperately reaching for it, that's kind of when it seems like it happens. When you don't want it so desperately.
Can you tell me about anything you've been working on more recently that we may not have had the chance to see yet?
Well, of course, there's what I just mentioned was Madness and the Meth, the Jason Mewes movie, which now is finally out in the UK for digital download and DVD. So that's cool. Digital, you can do digital download, which is good for coronavirus. So I did this movie called Bad Candy, and it's an anthology, a horror anthology like Creepshow. And there's a big wraparound story. The wraparound story is that all of the stories are kind of told by a DJ at the radio station. So he starts telling them the stories, and as he tells the stories, it cuts to the stories, and you see them. But the wraparound story is the DJ telling it. And so I play the DJ's producer, and the DJ is played by Corey Taylor, who's the lead singer for the legendary metal band Slipknot. That was really fun. We shot that here in Georgia in January, and it was, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of my work in it. I have no idea how good or bad the movie's going to be. You never do. But it was a fun thing to do, and it was fun to get in front of the cameras again. And I shot that the first week of January this year before any craziness went down. And that'll probably be out, I would guess around, if they're smart, around Halloween. So you can look for that. It's called Bad Candy. And then I have two other things that unfortunately I can't mention because I have signed what are called non-disclosure agreements.
Sure.
So all I can say is, for people watching, there's stuff coming.
And so, of course, you're very welcome to come back and talk about them when you're allowed to as well.
Okay, I will do.
And you recently came over to the UK to film Keith and Paddy's Picture Show, where you recreated scenes from Gremlins, but you were the director of the piece. Was that fun to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty close now with Keith Lemon, or Lee Francis, as his actual name is, and so we've worked together now like 1, 2, 3, 4 times, 3 or 4 times, and he's a great guy. I didn't know Patty. I had a great time. Patty was hilarious. The two of them were really fun together, and that was just like 3 or 4 days of constant laughter. The only bad thing about it was we did it in January, and it was so cold. To do some outdoor stuff in the cold too, and it was like, my gosh. The UK sure is nippy that time of year, but he's great, and Patty's great, and I miss those guys. I would have been back in the UK in May for another convention for the situation with the virus. I would have been back. So there you go.
Well, so yeah, hopefully that will get sorted soon. And next time you're over in the UK, you're very much welcome to have another chat in person, hopefully.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you to
Of course.
extend the invitation.
Oh, it's an open lifetime invitation, especially with your several renaissances you're going to have and stuff as well. And
Well,
so
we can only hope about the renaissances.
I've wanted and hoped for Gremlins 3 for a long time. Is there any chance of that ever happening?
Well, here's what I don't know for a fact. I can't imagine they would be putting all of this time and money into the animated series purely for the animated series to be the end.
Right.
I think the animated series is the beginning. And I think it's the beginning of the resuscitation of the franchise. And I think the reason why they're doing the animated series is, if I could explain it in one sentence, is people under 20 don't really know Gremlins. That generation doesn't know Gremlins. So the animated series is literally just a tool to educate them about the Gremlin mythology.
Sure.
And if it's successful, and they're going to pour so much money into it. I mean, it's going to be one of the flagship programs of HBO Max. I mean, Warner Brothers is really, really going to be behind it in a major way.
Mm.
If that is successful and people respond to it, I mean, you know, you could see it going two ways. People will love it and go, "Oh my God, Gizmo's so cute," or they'd go, "Gizmo's a Baby Yoda ripoff." I suppose that's the worst thing that could happen.
Right.
But then you could also, if they're smart, they could twist that into a which one is cuter, Gizmo or Baby Yoda, and then you have a rivalry like Coke and Pepsi.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't make it there can only be one, you make it a competition. So if the animated series is successful, to me, it seems the only reason they did the animated series is not only to sell the merchandise, but it's to prepare the battlefield for a live action movie. I don't see any other reason for its existence.
Yeah.
These corporations think big.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done this before with other things. There's been Star Wars cartoons and then Star Wars movies, Godzilla, Batman cartoons, and then, you know, Marvel Comics cartoons, and then live action movies.
Yeah.
So the cartoons are almost always, you know, the tentative first step in relaunching the franchise. And I would be very, very, very astonished if they were spending all of this money without the end game being a live action movie. It just doesn't really make sense.
What do you sort of imagine Billy, Kate, and Gizmo are now in their lives? What do you think they've been up to?
Well, my guess is Gizmo's the same. He maybe has a few gray hairs in him, kind of like a dog does when a dog gets older.
Yeah.
I don't see Billy and Kate still together because I think that Phoebe Cates, who hasn't done anything, hasn't had anything to do with the movie business in 2 decades. I think it's highly unlikely that she would come back. It's not that I wouldn't want her back. I just think it's unlikely. I just don't think she needs it. She doesn't need the money. She doesn't need anything to do with it. And her behavior has suggested she's just simply not interested.
Sure.
So they could hire someone else to play her part, or they could simply make me divorced or widowed or whatever, which certainly could happen over a 30-year period. I don't know. I don't know what Billy would be doing. I really don't. I could see him being like a tech guy or a graphic designer or something like that. Maybe he does graphic design, or I think he's an artist, but he's also practical. You see that he goes and works for a corporation. I would imagine him doing something that would combine his creativity with the ability to make money.
I always wondered if it was possible, because of course Gizmo has a great temperament and he's sort of kind and all that kind of thing, the complete opposite of everyone that's kind of popped out with him. I wondered if it was possible to kind of have his own kids that never developed into Gremlins, but a sort of a similar temperament to him, so he could have his own little sort of extended family, if you like.
I mean, I think if you just dump a glass of water on him, he has his kids. I don't know. You know, one of the things that I always thought would be cute is that you should introduce a female Mogwai, and so that the last shot of Gremlins 3 is that instead of Gizmo being alone in the cage, he's got like a little snuggle buddy, which I always think would just, women would love that, and I think it would send most people just over the edge with the cuteness factor.
I'm still hoping for more, and I'm looking forward to the cartoon, and hopefully Warner Brothers does indeed revive this series with you very much in it too, and continue your story and indeed Gizmos. I must ask you, have you got a fun fact you can tell us about you, a party trick, a hobby, something we may not know?
What, a fun fact about me?
Yeah.
Party trick.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most famous ones is that I can put my entire fist in my mouth. Have you ever seen that?
That counts. Yeah.
So you take there's a trick to it. You take I haven't done this in a long time. I hope I don't hurt myself. You take your knuckle of your thumb and you lead with that. And then you go.
Well, that definitely counts as a party trick, I think.
Isn't that a party trick?
Yeah.
I can do this thing too, with your tongue. Can you do this?
Oh, wow. No, I can't. No. I've never even tried to do that. I can wiggle my ears. That's kind of it. You got any messages for people watching the Sarah O'Connell Show and your fans around the world?
The only thing I would say is, and I hope that you'll put this in all of the social media that you do. You'll tag me at ZWGman on Instagram and on Twitter. And the reason for my name is that's my initials, Zachary Wolf Galligan, ZWG, and I'm a man. So I'm ZWG Man, at ZWG Man on Twitter and Instagram.
Zach Galligan, thank you for coming on my show today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this interview. It's been a lot of fun.
And thank you to everybody watching at home. Be sure to share, subscribe, give this video a big thumbs up, and leave lots of lovely comments. We'll see you all again soon for another episode of the Sarah O'Connell Show. Bye.
Bye. So there are 3 rules. Don't expose them to bright light. Don't get them wet. Never ever feed them after midnight. And wait, there's a 4th rule. Make sure you subscribe to the Sarah O'Connell Show.